Spectre. Well, we can't all be geniuses, can we?
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Rock Island taking a look at a Spectre. This is an Alchemy Arms Spectre pistol, which is basically a hybrid of a Glock slide on a 1911 frame. It was developed by Alchemy Arms. This is a company that formed in 1991, primarily at first making firearms accessories, pistol accessories, for both the 1911 and the Glock. The guy who owned the company was named William McMoore, and over the next few years, he got the idea that, well, he could put together the ideal automatic pistol, which would combine, as he saw it, I suppose, all the best features of the Glock and the 1911. Now, McMoore's company also did aerospace machining work, and that's kind of a common carryover or common tie-in companies, machining companies working for both the aerospace industry and the firearms industry. It's a good combination. Aerospace requires high levels of precision, good machining, a lot of the same things that firearms work requires. However, the engineering that goes into the two different projects is not quite the same. At any rate, McMoore got this idea to develop what would become the Spectre pistol, and in 1998 he hired a guy named Todd Petchnick, who was a CAD designer for Boeing at the time, and while I don't have a specific reference for this, I suspect that he had a connection to Petchnick and to Boeing through his company's aerospace work. At any rate, Petchnick took on this project of taking the pistol concept and turning it into an actual full-fledged manufacturable design. He would do this over the next couple of years. The pistol was announced in 2000 at SHOT Show and initially produced in 45 ACP. That's the initial design was 45 ACP. Remember that this is during the assault weapons ban, so manufacture of magazines holding more than 10 rounds was illegal at the time, and so there was the market was being pushed towards larger caliber cartridges, 40 and 45 in particular, because a standard sized frame double stack pistol in theory you could hold 15, 16, 17, 18 rounds of 9mm, but they were legally restricted to only 10. Well, if you can only have 10, you might as well make them bigger. And so there were a lot of larger caliber pistols being made, and this is a good example of them. Now, between 2000 and 2006, there would be some more developmental work done slowly. The pistol was supposed to be also made in 9mm and 40 caliber. Those were the secondary calibers. The idea was we'll sell it in 45 and then we'll use that money and market interest to further develop the gun into these other cartridges. And that never really happened. But before we talk about where this pistol ended, let's take a closer look at what features Petchnick and McMoore put into it. If we take a look at the markings, we have Spectre in nice big old letters on the side of the slide, along with the Alchemy Arms logo on the front of the slide, as well as in the form of a grip medallion. Same medallion on the other side, as well as the logo and Spectre again. And then we have the company information here on the frame. It's Alchemy Arms out of Auburn, Washington. Serial number on this is 599, but they didn't start at 0 or even 100. In total, they only made something between like 100 and 200 of these pistols. And the top of the barrel is marked with that logo again, and the caliber, which is 45 ACP. If there's one specific thing that Spectre and McMoore and Alchemy Arms wanted to make a priority, it was safety, because they put a whole bunch of safeties into the Spectre. So first off, sticking to its 1911 frame roots, it has a grip safety as well as a manual thumb safety, left side only. It does not actually have a trigger safety like a Glock, but that's because it has a 1911 style trigger on it. Nor does it have a magazine safety, which I'm a little surprised at. That seems like the sort of thing that they would have done. The advertising material around the pistol made a substantial point of mentioning the drop safety and the firing pin block. Those are both internal automatic safeties, but they took that sort of thing very seriously. And then they also stuck a tubular lock safety on the bottom of the mainspring housing, and this locks the, there we go. This locks the trigger, and it also prevents you from being able to take the magazine out when the gun is locked up there. So we're going to unlock this and hope that it doesn't mess up. There we go. One other element that was marketed as a safety feature is this little notch cut out on both sides of the trigger guard. And the intention there was that that was an index point for your trigger finger, that you can feel this and know that your finger is on the outside of the gun. And actually, that's pretty nice. That makes for a good habit-forming place to rest the trigger finger without it being in the trigger guard. So, you know, you can do that with other features on the gun. You could use the takedown lever there to do it. You could, you know, people get used to doing this wherever, but it's kind of neat that the pistol design actually included a feature specifically to do that. As I said, this was initially introduced in 45 ACP. One of the issues with them was actually procuring magazines quickly enough. And this isn't a proprietary magazine. This is actually an EAA Witness magazine that they used, which has an additional magazine catch slot cut in it. So this bottom one is the Witness cut. This top one is there to fit the magazine release on the Spectre. In fact, you can actually see on the bottom here, this is a McMoore magazine. They do OEM magazines for a lot of different pistols. And you can see it's still marked, it's a Witness 45. So if you have one of these and can't find magazines, well, EAA Witness magazines work, and that's an easy little notch to cut in a magazine. The marketing literature talks about several different models that were intended to be made. This is just kind of the standard steel slide. It is a stainless steel slide with an aluminum frame, anodized aluminum frame. And you could get these basically in the white, you know, in a polished white finish. You could get them black like this. You could get the guns two-toned or all black or green. And they also had a plan to offer a titanium slide, which I'm a little bit curious about, because titanium, one of the reasons people like it, it's both stronger than steel and also substantially lighter. And if you were to replace a steel slide with an identical titanium slide, I suspect you would have some operating issues, because the reduced mass of the slide would cause the pistol to unlock and open rather more quickly than it was designed to. So I don't think they ever actually produced a titanium slide, but I'd be curious to know what the plans were to actually make that happen. A bunch of the guns that are out there were actually special ordered by a gun shop with these specific, I think they're Heine big dot sights, which I don't really like, but you'll find those on a number of Spectres. From a handling perspective, there are a couple elements here that I'm also not hugely a fan of. The trigger is long and heavy. It is a straight back trigger. So it very much has the, I don't want to say the feel of a 1911 trigger, but it operates mechanically like a 1911 trigger. It doesn't pivot, it's just straight back. The problem is it's a heavy striker fired trigger press, which is not great. I also personally find the grip to be rather sharply square cornered right up here in the back strap. So it's interesting that they left the beaver tail on, even though it doesn't have a hammer. I think some of that was to get the look of a 1911 style pistol. It does prevent you from bringing your hand high enough up to get cut by the slide, which I suppose is an issue for some people. Disassembly is just like a Glock, so we'll check that it's empty, dry fire it, and then just pull the slide slightly back, pull down on these two little levers, and the slide comes right off the front of the gun. You will see this referenced various places as being interchangeable with an actual Glock slide. I figured we can try that out. So this is a Glock 23 slide. It's slightly shorter, but we can see if it fits anyway. And lo and behold, it actually, if I line it up, so it actually does fit all the way back until I get to the last bits of the fire control group. And this guy doesn't quite fit past the striker plate on the Glock slide. So it's close, like everything else fits, but not quite right there. And if we look at the two slides side by side, you can see that the Spectre has a bigger cutout on the right side than the Glock does. So I'll be honest, I don't know my Glocks quite well enough to know if this is something that changed on different generations, and maybe there is some generation of a Glock slide that would fit, but this is just really a funny thought experiment more than anything else. You don't want to actually swap slides out. Barrels, I believe, are exactly interchangeable and can be swapped, and I would suspect the recoil springs would work just fine as well. Internally here on the Spectre, you can see that we've got the trigger with the stirrup connection going back around the magazine well. That trigger is going to press on this disconnector. There's a spring that holds it all the way in the rear position when not in use, but when you pull the trigger, this stainless looking piece drops down back there, and that is going to release the striker right here. That's your firing pin block, by the way. This has to be pushed up when the gun's fully in battery to allow the striker to drop all the way. Otherwise, that pin prevents the striker from going forward. That's one of the automatic safeties that prevents the gun from firing if it is, say, dropped or if one of the components breaks. Not a whole lot else going on there. The grip panels are integrated into the aluminum frame along with finger grooves, which were cool in the 90s and 2000s and are kind of looked down on a bit now. They're not the current trend. So you've got steel inserts here for the rails that the slide actually runs on so that they're not, you don't have a steel slide wearing on an aluminum frame. There were a number of problems with the Spectre. There were a lot of QC issues. They had magazine supply problems, which kind of harken back to the Bren 10, although not as serious as the Bren 10 because this was not a terribly difficult magazine to get. They just had trouble sourcing them in a timely manner and in sufficient quantities. But they had a lot of QC issues in manufacture. I think one of the elements that aerospace engineers transitioning into firearms perhaps aren't all that well prepared for is the idea that, well, a firearm, yes, has to be precisely machined and the parts have to be nicely interchangeable and well heat treated and capable of withstanding high pressures, especially certain particular components. They also have to be capable of cycling with near 100% reliability with ammunition that will meet a variety of different tolerances, because different companies making different ammunition, they're not all quite identical. And especially when you get into some of the lower end, less expensive ammunition, you get steel cases instead of brass. You'll get surplus ammunition that may have been made over the past 50, 60, 100 years to substantially varying specifications. And the consumer market demands that a pistol be able to run any of that flawlessly, and that can cause problems. I think a lot of aerospace engineers are trained to have something actually running on tighter, closer tolerances than handguns can really tolerate, because in the aerospace industry, you're pretty sure that the components that your thing is interacting with are all going to be as well made as your thing, and ammunition doesn't necessarily meet that same kind of standard. Anyway, the upshot is there were some QC issues. Production was slow. This wasn't the only thing that this company was doing. They were still also involved in aerospace. And it appears that between 2001 and 2006, McMoore kind of lost his interest and focus in the pistol. The Spectre sort of became a money pit for the company. They just kept dumping money into R&D and manufacturing, and they weren't getting a lot of sales to back it up. The combination of features may seem cool on paper. It may have seemed great to McMoore, but it didn't really appeal to that many consumers who are willing to actually shell out the money to buy one. It's one thing to think that the concept is neat and to enjoy looking at it and talking about it. It's another thing to plunk down the cash and walk away with one. And I think they had problems of the 1911 people really disliked the Glock elements, and the Glock people really disliked the 1911 elements of the gun, and you end up pleasing virtually nobody. So by 2006, Alchemy Arms had actually become insolvent. They went bankrupt. Apparently McMoore basically took a contract job in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia or something along those lines, and went back and refocused on aerospace work instead. And so the company is defunct, and only a few hundred of these pistols were actually made, which makes it a fantastic candidate for something like forgotten weapons today, because it is mechanically unusual, scarce, rare. And I think it's it's an interesting case study, and I think there are a lot of good lessons to be learned from this for anyone who's trying to get into handgun manufacture. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.